Now, sometimes it's quite hard to believe reality. When you see it, you can't quite understand why it's being rolled out to you. And one of the things I think today that we can quite happily agree on is that the Green Industrial Revolution, as unveiled by Boris Johnson about 3 days ago, was quite ridiculous. It seems to have been completely forgotten, by the way. You know, we're going to do away with all petrol and diesel cars by 2030. We're all going to be driving around in electric bikes, electric boats, maybe, electric planes possibly as well. Anything electric's fine. But where is it all going to come from? Let's talk to Olivia Utley, who is Deputy Leader Writer at The Sun, of course, and this is her take on the week. Olivia, very good morning to you.
Hiya.
I mean, it seems amazing, doesn't it, that they could have this incredible kind of PR campaign just about 3 days ago, and now nobody's talking about it anymore.
I know. It made absolutely no sense at all. We obviously just don't have the infrastructure in place to have everyone driving electric cars by 2030. It's been brought forward by 10 years. Also, what I couldn't get my head around is it seems to be worse for the environment, everyone driving electric cars, because the stuff that you make the batteries out of in electric cars is mined from all sorts of parts of Africa, which will be just decimated.
Well, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Also, there's been no kind of explanation of where all this electricity is going to be generated from to power all of the things that we're going to be made electric. You know, so we're going to have like hydrogen-powered buses. We're going to have hydrogen-powered boilers, apparently. So you're going to rip out the gas that you've got and rip out the gas infrastructure that lots of people use. Which who's going to pay for it all?
To use electricity, which is powered by gas. So that's not particularly helpful. Who's going to pay for it is a huge question, because it'll make driving the sort of privilege of rich people.
Yeah.
No one can afford electric cars, or the government subsidises electric cars for people. And I read somewhere that an electric car over the course of its lifetime, an electric car that costs 23,000 will cost the taxpayer 20,000 in subsidies over the course of its lifetime. So it's incredibly expensive and not very much greener. No wonder they're not talking about it after a few days.
Well, exactly right. And also, it's a bit like that kind of thing that they ask you to do in nursery, isn't it? You know, why don't you paint a picture of what you'd like the world to look like? And that's what Boris Johnson's kind of green policy is. It's like, what we'd like it to be is this. But actually, that's never going to happen.
No, and we know what will happen. No one will talk about it for the next 8 years. And then 2 years before the 2030 deadline, everyone will start panicking in government and will remember this embarrassing pledge that was made back in 2020.
Right.
It's also just clearly not the moment. You know, everyone's trying to get back on their feet again. The last thing they need is a massive tax hike or just to make driving far more expensive. All of these policies are made up in London, where people don't really need to drive at all.
Right.
It's what we were saying about cyclists last week as well. It's the same thing. I mean, it's very easy to cycle around London. You don't need to drive, and you can probably afford to pay a bit more for an electric car. But if you live anywhere else, then that's just completely impossible.
Well,
it will make driving impossible.
But the thing that worries me, I came across some character on social media the other week who was the cycling mayor of Coventry. Now, don't make any mistake, this is not an elected job, right? This is something which is appointed by some operation over in Holland, and they appoint cycling mayors of various parts of the world, including Coventry for some reason, right? And this guy's actually not even pretending that they want to have electric cars. He's actually saying, we don't want any cars in the city. But they actually, there are people there. Oh, the cat's made an appearance. There are people there. You're looking like a Bond villain now, stroking your cat there. The point about this whole business is that they now want to get rid of cars out of cities altogether. Carless cities is a thing.
Yeah, which again is all very well if you can afford not to leave the city, really. Most people need to leave the city to see their parents, to see their children, to work outside of the city, and the cheapest and most sensible way is to drive. We get really sick of it at the Sun, because it just seems to be an eternal war on motorists, just making life so expensive and really difficult for them, for people who policies made up by people who really don't need to drive.
No. It is a worrying thing, because also an awful lot of it has happened during the lockdown, hasn't it? We've heard from all parts of the country that this kind of surreptitious creeping sort of development of the various city streets in all sorts of places like Leeds, Manchester, London, elsewhere, Birmingham, where suddenly you wake up one morning and the road you used to go down has got a big plant pot in it, so you can't use it, or there's a big cycle lane that's been built, or there's a big curb that means that you can't get through that particular spot. And it's all been done because everyone thought there wouldn't be anyone driving around. But of course, the reverse has happened, because now nobody's on the public transport system.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's impossible to see how that's going to end, really, because I think it was assumed right at the beginning of lockdown that sort of life would never go back to normal. So these really short-sighted policies were put in place, and all of these cycle lanes just took over the whole of London and I'm sure other cities around the UK. And now people just are going back to work, and they are going to go, by the end of next year, we probably almost definitely will have a working vaccine. Life will go back to normal, and we'll just have to undo all of this ridiculous half-built infrastructure. So, yeah, it's just very, very poorly thought through, all of it.
Talking about going back to normal, it's back to the future for the Labour Party this week as well, isn't it? Because it was just like it was 2019 again.
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, I feel actually quite sorry for Keir Starmer because obviously he does want to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn for good. But he's sort of hamstrung by the NEC, which is a pack full of Corbynites. We always knew that was the problem with Corbyn taking over. It wasn't just his leadership of the Labour Party. It was that he packed all of the structures of the Labour Party with his people. So now poor Keir Starmer was sort of unable to kick Jeremy Corbyn out for good. So he's reached this bizarre compromise, which is that Jeremy Corbyn is too anti-Semitic to be a Labour MP, but well, it's okay. He can still be in the Labour Party. It makes absolutely no sense at all.
Yeah, and depending on who in the Labour Party you speak to, he's still and depending on who you speak to in the Labour Party, he either still is a Labour MP or he's sort of just on the outskirts of it, but he will be soon. And there's as many as 32 Labour MPs have put their name to a document which is demanding the whip be restored.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to them, I sort of see their logic. If he can be a Labour MP, then if he can be a Labour member, then why sort of shouldn't he be a Labour MP? Obviously, I don't think that he should be a Labour member at all. It's just terrible politics by Keir Starmer because he's managed to infuriate pretty much everyone. I mean, British Jews and people vaguely to the right of the Labour Party are absolutely furious that he's been allowed back in, and yet his own supporters are furious that he's not allowed to be an MP. So it's just like,
I think the most offensive thing he's done this week is to wear that ghastly sky blue sort of jacket that I saw him emerging from his house with. I don't know where he got that from, but it certainly is not. I mean, it's the sort of thing that you would wear on a sort of one of those TV game shows, isn't it?
I haven't seen that. I would love to see that.
Oh, I think we might have some footage of it. We'll see if we can put it up there later on. But, I mean, this is the other thing about the Labour Party. Keir Starmer has now appeared as if he's completely powerless, completely neutered. He has no ability to control his own party. And yet we're told this is a guy who could be the Prime Minister. Well, what happens if he becomes the Prime Minister and he still can't control his own party?
I know. And he sort of throws his arms up and you get the impression that he's saying, well, that's not my fault, it's the fault of the NEC. But if you can't get the NEC back to a sort of sensible, civilised board of ordinary people, then this is just going to be, there'll be problems like this throughout his tenure. So, yeah, as you say, how on earth can he be Prime Minister if he can't even control the Labour Party?
I mean, if it was me, I think I might say to him, look, I'll tell you what we'll do. We will restore the whip to you. However, you do actually need to apologise for what you did, which he still hasn't done.
No, I mean, what he has done is, so he said on the 25th of October that the claims were overstated, and it claims that the Labour Party was anti-Semitic under his tenure were overstated and exaggerated. And now, 2 weeks later, he said, I never suggested, it would be wrong to say that claims of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party were exaggerated. So he's gone completely back on his word. Right. But yeah, I'm yet to hear a sorry.
No, he's done that kind of, obviously I regret if something's happened that some people got upset about, which is not the same as saying I'm sorry for something that I actually did, which is madness. The other big story that we've talked about here, and we managed to get it on Plank of the Week this week as well, was the Crown, of course, because Harry and Meghan have got themselves into a bit of trouble over the fact that Harry has said nothing really about the way that his mother and father are being portrayed in this latest series 4.
Yeah, well, he's got himself in some hot water, hasn't he? Because he's got this deal with Netflix,
right?
And he can't really say anything critical of Netflix. And yet this. Oh, I mean, I always quite liked The Crown. It was sort of silly, but enjoyable. The problem with this series, I find, it's actually just quite boring. It would be a much better drama if all the characters were represented accurately instead of just sort of this love fest of Diana, and everyone else presented as sort of evil,
Yeah.
which obviously isn't accurate, and it's so simplistic. It's actually just boring.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I watched it for the first time on Sunday night, and I'd never watched an episode of it in my life, okay? And I just thought it was really, really negative. You know, almost everyone in it, as you say, was painted as some kind of either upper-class twit or kind of, you know, completely and utterly unfeeling, ghastly member of the aristocracy, or in Margaret Thatcher's case, you know, somebody who appears to have a sort of speech impediment, talking very slowly, as if, you know, she didn't really understand anything.
Yeah, exactly. No one's relatable at all. And there's all the materials for a brilliant drama there. You've got really interesting characters, really sort of interesting multi-layered characters trying to make a sort of impossible situation work. And yet what the Crown's done is just sort of made them all into, as you say, upper class twits, completely unfeeling, totally unrelatable. And apart from Diana, who's presented as absolutely wonderful, but you know, everyone else is so evil. It's completely unbelievable and not particularly watchable.
And I must say, one of the things that I found quite objectionable about it was the way that they portrayed the assassination of Lord Mountbatten, because the kind of the mood music around the explosion on the boat was almost as though it was somehow justifiable, given, you know, the occupation of Ireland.
Yeah, exactly. It does.
That upset quite a lot of people, actually.
Yeah, quite a lot of these sort of voiceovers. It comes across as pretty IRA sympathetic, and yeah, I mean, yeah, as though Lord Mountbatten, I'm sure he wasn't the nicest man in every single way, but yeah, it's literally presented as though his murder was somehow justified.
Yeah,
yeah,
because he might have been a bit of an adulterer for some reason. The other thing as well that I found remarkable is Peter Morgan, the writer of the show, who's a very esteemed and well-known writer who did Frost Nixon and a bunch of other things, has actually admitted that basically he made a load of stuff up. And you think to yourself, you know, of all the stories from history that involve the royal family, Charles and Diana's story really doesn't need any extra oomph. I mean, it's a pretty scandalous and sensational story from beginning to end. The idea that you have to kind of make up scenarios to make it a bit more interesting is ridiculous, isn't it?
I know, this is the thing, and you know, it's all very well for lots of people to say, yeah, well, it's only a drama. That's what the writer said all the time. Well, it's only a drama. Yeah, but people are obviously watching it, thinking it's
right.
Real history. I was looking at some sort of Facebook group, and so many people going, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe the way that Charles treats Diana, and all of this detail. How could he have gone away when she was there?" And then you look it up, and it just didn't happen.
Right.
And people are obviously assuming that it's history.
Yeah.
So it's too easy a get out clause just to say, "Oh, it's just a drama." It's about real people living today.
And exactly right. And that is the point. And that's why, you know, looking at the way Prince William has kind of interfered into the BBC's investigation, not only interfered, but more or less ordered a proper investigation into the Martin Bashir business. You know, his brother Harry is keeping very quiet, presumably under orders from Mrs. Harry, not to upset the apple cart when it comes to Netflix.
Yeah, of course, because that's where the next paycheck's coming from.
Yeah.
He's going to find himself in situations like this, surely, over and over and over again. It just shows, how could he have just run off to Hollywood and not realise that there were going to be huge consequences, that there were going to be massive conflicts of interest all the time. As you say, Mrs. Harry is...
Well, the Mail actually ran a piece yesterday on Mail Online about my interview with Angela Levin earlier in the week, who curiously actually writes for the Mail. So you think they might have got it from her originally. But when she said she interviewed Harry just about 2 years ago, and he said to her that they were all watching The Crown, but that he would make sure that they weren't able to interfere with his life because he would stop them before they got that far. Well, that hasn't really worked out, has it?
No, it hasn't worked out at all. And surely we'll just be barreling through. I don't know what the plan is for the rest of The Crown, but surely we'll just be barreling through right up until the present day, and they're going to be huge problems, Harry.
Well, maybe, you know, if it all goes to plan, maybe Meghan and Harry will just play themselves.
Yeah, that's their dream come true, I think. Utter narcissists getting huge amounts of money to just play themselves.
Just play yourself, just even invent some stuff that you never did to make out that you're much nicer than you really are. Great.
Yep, that sounds like Meghan. Maybe that's a part that she could act well.
The perfect scenario. Yeah, brilliant stuff. Olivia, thank you very much indeed. Olivia Utley, Deputy Leader Writer at The Sun, with her take on the big stories of the week. Very interesting as well, because, you know, this whole Crown Netflix thing isn't going to go away. I know that some people are sick to death of hearing about Harry and Meghan, but you've got to remember that there are still people who believe that Harry and Meghan are part of the royal family. There are still people who believe that they are trading on that particular name, because they are. And I'm afraid we're not going to stop picking them up on it. It's as simple as that.